Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of Mass Communication 100, Intro to Mass Comm. Today, we will be talking about Chapter 3, Digital Gaming and the Media Playground. This video will focus primarily on the development of gaming, and then we'll talk about the gaming industry, as well as gaming communities and the effects of video games. So this is my earliest memory of a handheld game. This is a flip disc or waterfall ring toss where you're trying to use air pressure to toss rings in the air. It's not exactly what we think of when we think of the gaming industry and handheld gaming, but this is what I grew up with. And so I've seen video games really revolutionize from this to the very intense and very involved type of gaming that I do now. I do want to give a little bit of a warning that I am not a hardcore gamer. I do play video games. I love video game culture. However, I would not consider myself a hardcore gamer by any means, but I have a true appreciation for the gaming industry and do play a lot of them myself. So pinball was one of the first ways that gaming culture really began in America. After the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people had a lot more leisure time in their lives, thanks to a lot of technology and development that happened during the Industrial Revolution. And so the birth of penny arcades began, where there were games of strength, simulated bowling, simulated horse racing, and it really started the gaming industry. But it wasn't until the first mechanical game of pinball began that gaming really began as a cultural icon. And ironically, one of the main reasons that pinball became a large part of society and culture was because it was originally banned in many areas. In the 1930s and 40s, the game looked a little bit different. There was only a launch ball. You did not have the flippers on the bottom where you had to hit on the sides to kind of control it. So you're really just launching a ball and seeing how many points you could get. So a lot of people considered this a game of chance and not a game of skill, which meant it was gambling, and gambling was illegal in a lot of areas at this time. So there were lots of underground pinball arcades where people would come and try to hide out from the cops in order to play pinball. This banning of the game really created this culture and community that came together to play it, even though it was illegal. And so we have pinball really affecting larger culture. You can hear it in the Who song that just played. I love that song, so I wanted to play it for you guys. Plus, I think it's a little fun. But it's important to note that pinball is no longer illegal to play. You can play it, don't worry. After World War II, they added the flipper bumpers on the side, which added a degree of skill and timing to the game, taking it from gambling to an actual game of skill. Now, it wasn't until 1948 when the first video game patent was issued for the cathode ray tube amusement device. Now, this game really never came to surface, but it was the first person to have the idea or the patent to make home video games. So even as early as the 40s, we were getting the idea that videos would integrate well with gaming. Unfortunately, we just didn't see it come to fruition until much later. Now, in the 1970s and 80s, we saw video games come to life with these favorites like Asteroids, Pac-Man, and Donkey Kong. Can't tell you how many hours I've wasted playing these 3 games, but maybe they're not a waste. We can talk about that some other day, but these are some of the earliest video games that were popular. Now, arcade-style games like these 3 are still around. You can visit Dave & Buster's in Hoover maybe after some of the COVID scare. This is actually my family playing arcade games. We love playing games together. But arcade games are still around. They just became less easy to use once the advent of home video gaming came about. Now, in 1972, Odyssey released the first home television game. Over 330,000 consoles were sold in just under 3 years. The Odyssey was $100 per unit, which back in the 70s was a lot of money. But it was obviously a great market to start into, and many people were really interested in it. Here's a commercial from 1972 of the first home television game. So Magnavox came out with this in 1972, and of course the Odyssey looks a lot different from the consoles that we know and love today, but it revolutionized the gaming industry for us. Also in 1972, Atari released their home video game console. You may be familiar with Pong, which is one of my favorites. It was a video game that was first popular in arcades, but in 1975 launched for a home game release with the home version only available at Sears. Now, this was also the first video game that included sound. So if you have never heard the sounds of Pong before and the gut-wrenching feeling when you hear that jarring, then you don't understand the love that is Pong. Now in 1985, Super Mario Brothers became the best-selling game of all time. In fact, it held that spot for many, many years until Wii Sports was released in 2009. I have spent many, many hours trying to rescue Princess from various villains within Super Mario Brothers, but this was by far the most popular video game in history. In 1999, Sega Dreamcast really changed the way of gaming because it was the first console to have a built-in modem, the first one to connect to the internet. This allowed for the social experience of gaming because people could go online and play multiple players at one time, even if they were not in the same location. This led to the building out of massively multiplayer online role-playing games, or MMORGs. That's hard to say, it's why they abbreviate it, but World of Warcraft is perhaps the most popular and well-known of this gaming type. In 2010, World of Warcraft had over 12 million subscribers, 12 million people who were playing it. So you can see how adding the internet to these gaming consoles really changed the way that gaming was done. Portable gaming was also an important part in the gaming industry. In 1989, Nintendo released the first handheld gaming console with Game Boy. I loved my Game Boy and had tons and tons of games for it. My favorite was Tetris, of course. 120 million units were sold from 1989 to 2003, showing just how popular it was. In 2004, Nintendo DS was then released, followed by PSP and PlayStation Vita. And recently we've had Nintendo Switch, which kind of moves from a console gaming to a portable console, depending upon how you're wanting to play it. Current consoles, the most popular are still the Nintendo Wii, which was the first to use a wireless motion sensor as a remote, allowing for you to move and your movements to be tracked while playing. This same kind of sensoring system can be used in Wii U and Gamepad. The Nintendo Switch, like I said, kind of jumps back from console to portable gaming system. And then Microsoft has the Xbox. I think the most popular one right now is Xbox One. And Xbox Live actually has 48 million subscribers to it. So you can see it's a very popular gaming system. However, the most popular is PlayStation 4, which has 150 plus PlayStation Network users currently. Now, consoles have really adapted to media convergence because if you own one of these consoles, you may know that it's really an all-in-one entertainment center. If you have an Xbox or a PlayStation, you can also play Blu-rays and DVDs. You can get on Facebook and Twitter. You can watch Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and many other channels, or you can listen to Spotify. In fact, in 2012, Xbox did a study and found that their Xbox Live users spent more time watching videos and listening to music on Xbox than actually playing Xbox games. This means that in order to survive, the gaming industry is having to compete against other types of media for attention, even on its own consoles. Now, computer games were also an important part of the gaming industry because they allowed for a lot of home use. A lot of this computer games happen prior to really the popularization of home media consoles, but it required someone to have a personal PC at home, which wasn't really popular until the 80s and 90s. These computer games really mimicked the arcade games of old. So you may remember that Asteroid, Tetris, even Donkey Kong began as arcade games, but they were quickly adapted for computer games as well. And of course, who doesn't love playing solitaire when they're super bored? Computer games were also the first to include first-person shooter games. The first-person shooter game ever created was Doom, which is located on the lower left-hand corner. I spent many years in middle school and high school playing Doom. It is a very graphic, violent first-person shooter game, and so it really became the advent of those action games that we know now. Computer games really dipped off with the advent of console gaming, but they're making a comeback in recent years with many different types of gaming that is done on computers. The future of gaming really relies on three primary technologies. The first is mobile gaming. So there are all different types of games that are available on your smartphone devices. My favorite to play, I'm sure this shocks all of you, is Disney Magic Kingdoms, where you get to build your own kingdom of Disney World. I know it's really surprising, but of course we have tons of other popular mobile games like Pokemon Go, Angry Birds, and many, many others. Speaking of Pokemon Go, augmented reality has been introduced recently, primarily for mobile gaming. Pokemon Go was the first to do it, where you see the background of your actual house or environment. But on top of that, you have augmented reality, some type of technology that has been placed to make it seem like it's there, but it's really not, of course. And you get to battle Draco Malfoy while you are on your walk. So augmented reality could also be an aspect to keep gaming alive in the future. The most hotly debated is whether virtual reality will become an important aspect of the future of gaming. Virtual reality usually requires you to wear headsets or other technology that is meant to transport you into a new environment, but the equipment to do virtual reality can be costly, and the technology hasn't really caught up quite yet. So the graphics aren't up to where they need to be. And in fact, a lot of people get very sick when using virtual reality. I've actually done a lot of studies on virtual reality and was in a virtual reality setup, a workshop with it. And a lot of our participants would actually get motion sickness while doing virtual reality. And so there's lots of barriers for virtual reality to overcome. However, the equipment for virtual reality is getting better each day. In fact, a company just recently released a treadmill for virtual gaming, allowing participants to run within their game, to jump, and it tracks all of your movements. We've even seen entire cars or virtual reality cars or platforms, mechanical systems being used. So you can see that virtual reality is really fighting for its place in the gaming industry. But it's missing one key element of gaming, and that is the community of virtual reality gamers. However, one company is trying to really tackle this. So this community of gamers could transform virtual reality to being a solo experience, to a group experience, similar to how adding the internet through the Sega Dreamcast really changed the way that people were able to game at home. So now that we've talked about some of the developments of the gaming industry, we should go to our discussion post and talk about how community is really important to gaming as a social mover. And then also watch the video on the gaming effects of media, which will primarily talk about the media convergence that is happening around the gaming industry.